Hello, this is wmpyr. I just watched a video on YouTube. It was point fighting championships. It was like the final match or something. And yeah, I just saw two athletes compete at a very high level. And what was interesting is when I scrolled down, right, and looked at the comments of what people were saying, there was one person in particular who said something very, very negative, and they were rude. What they basically said was point fighting is not effective in a real life situation, right? That's what they said, and I think there's a lot of people that feel this way. Okay, and from this person's point of view, they're trying to have a discussion. The funny thing is, in a discussion, if you're rude like that, you don't deserve a reply or a response. And they don't understand that they're being rude there. They're probably thinking, hey, I'm just saying what's the truth. I'm just saying as is. But actually, it's extremely rude. It's extremely disrespectful. So, this person doesn't know how to communicate politely, you know. So that's kind of sad at that point because they want to have a discussion. They just don't know how. They're incapable, right? Now, for me, if someone left a rude comment like that, I don't respond back. It doesn't matter how good their points are and the things they bring up, and they have good arguments and good logic. If you're rude, you don't deserve it. Period. So zero, right? Um, so I think once again, a lot of people feel that point fighting is ineffective, right? In a real life situation, they're coming from the point of view of full contact fighting. I think is what happens. And I saw an interview recently of Joe Louis, which I've actually seen this interview many times. He was a full contact karate fighter back in the day. He was a Bruce Lee student, and they say he is the father of American kickboxing. So Joe Louis said that he started off in point fighting, and it never made sense to him, and he didn't like it, and that's why he went into a full contact, and that's where he really enjoyed doing full contact, and he enjoyed kickboxing kind of thing, right? So that was his perspective, and once again, I think a lot of people feel that way with that. If you're just doing point fighting, it's more like a game of tag. Now, what this person was saying was that if you're playing this game of tag, you're going to be developing a lot of bad habits, and those bad habits will get you killed in a real fight. And so they give you a list of what exactly are the bad habits, like losing your balance after you strike, and also retreating right away without even landing a solid shot, and not doing combinations, this kind of thing. So, I mean, those are all good points, okay? But that doesn't mean because they're good points, it immediately equals, therefore point fighting is ineffective. You're rushing to conclusions there, and that's not the right thing to do. Those are all good points, therefore you could use those points to improve what you're doing. So if you're a point fighter, you could look at that and go, oh, okay, I can improve on that, But that is, if you look at bad habits, you could look at any style, any sport, and there are bad habits, So you can't just look at the bad habits, because I could look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and go, oh, they got some bad habits, therefore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu doesn't work on the street, which is not true. It can work on the street. I could look at Muay Thai kickboxing and say the same thing. I could look at, once again, any style on the planet and say the same thing. And that's not very logical, okay? So, bad people get really afraid of bad habits and stuff. Bad habits is, well, all it is, it's a place for you to work off of and improve and fix those bad habits, all right? Look, when I take a look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I remember in a tournament, I entered a tournament and I lost. I was using half guard techniques, and my opponent was using spider guard techniques. So if you go half guard versus spider guard, when you have the use of the gi, the spider guard has a very strong advantage. And so I felt like I was giving up a lot of a lot of possibilities because I refused to use the opponent's gi, because in my mind I was like, well, what if in a street fight I don't get to use, they're not wearing a gi, or whatever they're wearing is unreliable as a grip, it might rip or tear. So then, I don't want to develop techniques that rely on that. So I was like, I'm not going to use spider guard. I'm not going to use any sweep that involves grabbing the gi. And, so a lot of my weapons were gone. And so, of course, I'm at a disadvantage, And my point in doing that wasn't to win the match. So it was okay for me. I was like, it would have been nice if I had won, but it was all right, because to me it was important how you win. And if I won by spider guard, I wouldn't have been happy. It's like, yeah, I won, but I won by really relying on his gi. So for me, that was an important experience. I'm not saying that I wouldn't use the gi now, but I'm just saying that back then, I wanted to develop skills to where I wouldn't rely on the gi, because to me, relying on the gi would be a bad habit. So, I modified the way, and so therefore, that doesn't mean that BJJ doesn't work. It just means that you make those improvements for yourself, So with point fighting, you don't have to go like this and then fall afterwards, but go, hey, I hit you first, though. I hit you first, even though I ended up on the ground and you probably could have kicked me in the face if this was a real street fight, but I hit you first, So you could take out arsenals like that, and you don't have to do that. You may not win, but that's okay, So that's like me, how I changed my BJJ experience, And so that's all up to the individual, but that doesn't change the fact that BJJ or point fighting still offers some very, very good things to help you out. And this person was like, what exactly are those things? And then this person gave some examples, and then this person was like, all those things you mentioned, like timing, footwork, the sense of distance, controlling distance and stuff like that. All of those things can be done in a full contact style, like Muay Thai, kickboxing, or boxing, all of those things. But, the thing is, that's not true. It's different. The way that even the way a kick is done in point fighting is not the same as the way a kick is done in Muay Thai, or in some other full contact karate. It's not the same. Why? Because the purpose is not the same, and therefore what you're developing in point fighting is actually different from what you're developing in, let's say, full contact karate, like something like Kyokushin. It's not the same. Okay. And that's where I want to delve in, because in those comments, no one mentioned this, so I want to mention this. Why isn't it that they did say it's not the same, but it ended kind of right there. This guy's saying it's not the same, therefore, because it doesn't work. What works is different. It's different from the point fighting game of tag that you see. And that's where, once again, I beg to differ. The skill set developed is different, and therefore it is used at different times in a real life situation. So when I look at Filipino martial arts, it makes it very, very clear and easy for me to understand. What you're seeing in point fighting is used in long range. It's that simple. What you see in boxing and kickboxing is primarily for medium range. That's where, bam, a lot of the shots land. That's what medium range means. It means where they can reach me. I'm in their strike zone. Okay? Long range means they're out. We are out of it. They cannot reach me. I am not in their range to be struck. Not yet. So that's long range. And point fighting is long range. And the best example I could give you guys is John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. Okay, both of them very excellent fighters. And the reason why every single time they fight, John Jones comes out on top for me is because John Jones is very good at fighting in long range. And Daniel Cormier doesn't really have tools in long range. But in every other range, all the other threes, because in total there's four. There's long range, medium range, close range, and ground range, according to Filipino martial arts, right? So John Jones knows how to fight very well in long range. Daniel Cormier does not have long range. And then in medium range, close range, and ground range, the rest of the three, they're about equal. You know, they're about the same in medium, close, and ground. Okay, so everything else is about equal, but John Jones has long range, Daniel Cormier doesn't. So if all things given equal, but one person has an extra range, come on, who's going to come out on top? So to me, that is the reason why John Jones comes out on top, you know, is because of that extra range. So that gives him the advantage there. So can long range, the ability to fight in long range, can it help you out in MMA or in a street situation, in a self-defense situation? I think absolutely. Absolutely. Knowing long range can definitely help you out for sure. So it's really that simple. And yeah, I hopefully I made it. This is a clear-cut explanation for people to understand long range and point fighting. So are there things in point fighting that can be improved or changed? Not for the sport, because the sport has probably evolved to where people need to fight this way to be successful in that sport. So I get that. But that could be the same for boxing, for MMA, for anything, you know. And in a lot of those sports, stalling is a very useful tactic, but in a self-defense situation, you know, it may not be a smart move to stall someone on the ground because his buddy can come over and kick you, you know. But for the sport of MMA, it might actually be a very good strategy to do that and to secure your win. So, you know, every sport has evolved in a way that you need to fight a certain way that could have moved a little bit away from actual street usage, you know, and that's okay. You can modify that back. Still, the general skills developed in MMA or point fighting, you know, or judo or even sumo wrestling or whatever sport, you know, those present very valuable skills, I believe. For anyone. So you just have to have an open mind and not just look at this is what they're doing wrong, therefore it doesn't work. That's a very quick conclusion, and you know I just feel like it's very premature in my opinion. So when you look more thorough and more deep, point fighting definitely has its place, but you may also have to study something like fencing. You may also have to study fighting with weapons, and then it becomes a little bit more clear. But then you see that, hey, the same principles and strategies come over to weapons. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's two human beings fighting each other. So the core mechanism doesn't change. So even with firearms, the core mechanism, the concept, many of the concepts and strategies are still the same. So long range, medium range, close range, and ground range still apply. Whether it's firearms or a nuclear missile, it still applies. Of course, details will be drastically different, but the general concept there is still the same, in my opinion. So anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for viewing, and take care, folks.